Susan. All right.
Hello, everybody. It's so fun to see who's in the room.
Desiree, pardon.
Sarah and Desiree and Sandra and Sarah and Julie and Lena, Deb, Ellen, Cremina, Grace, Kyle, Barbara, Heather, probably others who I'm not even seeing yet. Latifa. All right, everybody. We have a beautiful hour planned for you. So my name is Stacy Sims, and I'm the founder of The Well, and we host these gatherings once a month, and we have been doing so since we all were quarantined and had nothing better to do but to hang out with like-minded others and celebrate poems. So the format is pretty simple. We follow it every time, which is we're going to begin with a meditation. And today, Troy Bronsink of the Hive is going to do our grounding meditation. Then we're going to listen to one of the poems from this season's Poetry Unbound. And I'm sure many of you are listening to this season, but I have to say, it's just gobsmackingly gorgeous, every single poem. So today we have Manuel Iris joining us again to read the poem, to talk about the poem, and give us the prompt, the writing prompt. So then we'll spend 10 to 12 minutes writing, and then if we choose to share, we'll share in the group. And then again later, which row we'll talk through at the end. So also just a note, I have to go to another meeting at 3:30, sadly. So I'm going to disappear. And at the end, rather than hearing from me, you're going to hear from Eddie Gonzalez from our fantastic partnership with On Being and the Civil Conversations Project about how they're celebrating poetry. And then Ro will finish us up. And I think that's it. Oh, I have one more thing in the housekeeping area that I need to share. So some of you were involved a couple of months ago. Time doesn't make much sense to me anymore. But you guys remember when Raina and Deandra came to talk about one of the poems? And remember how we all said, oh my gosh, this should be a podcast. Well, guess what? We're producing a podcast called The Three Sisters, and it will launch next week. And it features Deandra, Raina, and the eldest sister, Devana. And I just want to thank all of you, because if it weren't for On Being and it weren't for our gathering together, those voices wouldn't have been lifted. So thanks for inspiring that. So I'm going to turn it over to Troy.
Thanks, Stacy. It's great to see all of your, the parts of your bodies that the screens let us see. All of you present together, the gift of bringing our bodies into a shared experience. You can kind of miss out on that if you think you're just sitting in front of a flat screen, but it's your body that's in front of that screen. And on the other side of those cameras are other bodies. Today we're gonna, I'm excited about the poem that Manuel's gonna walk us through in our exercise, but there's a couple points at which it points to the author, Natalie Diaz, points to suffering, to her own and to others, and to our, in a sense, our community, the community of what it is to acknowledge one another's pain, to acknowledge our own wounds and scarring. And so I'd like to invite you into that, at what other depth feels comfortable for you. Anytime you talk about stuff like suffering, it can borderline on the heroic, like you're supposed to dive as deep as you can in the next 5 minutes. But just notice what arises instead. But I'd like you to first start with just a couple breaths, noticing how your body is situated. Right now, if you want to close your eyes, you can. I'm probably going to invite you to open yours during the meditation here, but just notice your feet underneath your knees if you're sitting likely, and the ways that your spine is stacked and the way the back of the spine makes its way through the neck and connects to the skull. And just take a few breaths considering I am here. My body is here. And then I invite you to turn, continuing to think inwardly, but for a moment, take your hand and notice if you want to take your right hand or your left hand, but if you're able, take one of your hands into your other hand and just begin to reflect on your own hand. Notice it for a moment. Notice its size. Notice the lines. Notice the temperature. Maybe move the hand over. Notice the front or back of it if you haven't yet. Imagine the weight of that hand. Solid part of you. See if you can hold it even towards your heart space and just what is it like to have compassion for this body of yours and particularly for this hand. Recalling times when this hand has clenched as a fist. Times when it's softened to another's touch or when it's been a softening touch. Your own hand, your own context that brings you here. Consider when this hand was much smaller. From the looks of us, that could be a grade school hand or a toddler hand or an infant hand. Consider as the hand grows older, as the hand one day grows cold. Just appreciating the gift of your own body and the gift of your own story. And then exhale for a moment. Now I invite you, if you're willing, to take your hand and move it closer to the screen, not where it covers your face, but to one side of the screen there. And I'd invite you to look at your screen and see if you would just for a moment kind of drop into considering another person. You know, if this weren't COVID times and we were together, you might be able to put that person's hand in your hand if they were willing. But just settle in on one person and appreciate the uniqueness of their own body, the uniqueness of their own story, the preciousness of their story. Times when their hand has had to clench in a fist. The times when their hand has softened to the touch or has been a softening touch. Consider the weight of their hand and the lines. Consider the cost of walking into the world with that hand and that body. Different ways that our embodiment and our bodies represent so many things and project so many things into the world. Just appreciate that hand. Imagine that hand as a young grade school hand and a little toddler hand and a baby hand. Imagine that hand as it ages and grows old and one day grows cold enough because there's no oxygen moving through it, and the gift that hand's been to the earth, the gift of these bodies. And now you're probably feeling a little tension in your bicep and shoulder by holding your arm up. So just receive for the moment that somebody else was saying that about your hand. That The great mistake is to live the drama as if we're alone, right? The great challenge is to not play the cynic. How can I receive the gift of another? So go ahead and let that hand rest for a minute. Take a few beats and breaths. Reflect on this present moment, on this breath, the gift of your own body, the gift of our collective bodies present to this moment. The sacredness of our scars and wounds. The possibilities in community and words. And from there, maybe take one more exhale, and then I'll pass it to my colleague Manuel. Thank you all.
Manuel, we're excited to hear the poem, and we're excited to hear what you think about
it. Am I to share the screen with the poem, or can someone else do it?
I'll do it.
Thank you. Well, the poem that we're reading today and that I'm going to talk about today is this beautiful poem by Natalie Diaz called "Of Course She Looked Back." I have to say that I'm a little nervous because this is not an easy poem. In the past gatherings where I commented poems, they were poems about forgiving or about letting go, about these very difficult things. And again, like any good poem, this one is also talking about something that is very difficult to do. I believe that this is a poem, among many other things, it's a poem about bearing witness. The poem comes off a biblical story, which is the story of Lot's wife. When the city of Sodom was going to be destroyed, Lot and his wife are told to go away to save themselves and to not look back to the destruction of the city. Famously, Lot's wife turns to see, and she gets turned into a statue or a pillar of salt. The usual reading is that she did what she was not supposed to do, and that's why she received this punishment. But Lot didn't turn to see the city, and also didn't turn to see his wife. Continued. So we're going to talk about the decision of this woman and how this other woman, Natalie Diaz, is saving the memories, bearing witness to the witness. And Natalie said, of course, you look back, you would have too. From that distance, the shivering city fit in the palm of her hand like she owned it. She could have blown the whole thing. Markets, dance halls, hookah bars. Send the city and its hundreds harems tumbling across the desert like a kiss. She had to look back. When she did, she saw pigeons glinting like debris above ruined rooftops, towers swaying. Women in broken skirts strew along burnout streets like busted bread bells. The noise was something else. Dogs wept, roosters howled, children and guitars hopped like kernels of corn, feeding the twinkling blaze. She wondered, had she unplugged the coffee pot, the iron? Was the oven off? Her husband uttered, keep going, whispered, stay the course, or baby, forget about it. She couldn't. Now, a bursting garden of fire, the city bloomed to a flame after a flame, like hot fruit on a persimmon market. Someone thirsty asked for water. Someone scared asked to pray. Her daughters of the crook-legged angel, maybe. Dark thighs of smoke opened to the sky. She meant to look away, but the sting in her eyes, the taste devouring her tongue, and the neighbors begging her name. So, knowing what we just know about the biblical story, it is impossible for me at least, to not realize that this poem comes very handy right now. This poem is about not looking away from destruction, even when we're scared, even when we might be punished for what happened. In this story, because of the sin of people in the city, the whole city was destroyed, including children, including animals, everything. You know, the Old Testament God is always like that. It's this terrible, punishing God that you must obey. However, there is no description of what was being destroyed in the biblical story. There is no description of anyone running or crying. We just talk about the city as if the buildings were being destroyed. Now, thanks to Natalie Diaz, we can see through the eyes of Lot's wife, who doesn't have a name. Lot's wife has no name in the Bible. It's only known as Lot's wife. But we can see through her eyes what was being destroyed. She was the witness. She decided that she was not going to act like that wasn't happening, like she never lived in the city, like these were not her friends, like these were not her neighbors, like these were not the people, the world that she knew. She decided to disagree, not only with her husband, but also with God and angels themselves. She is a witness, and by being the witness, she is the act and voice of dissent. She dissents. She did it. And she became a pillar of salt. She did become a statue, but that statue is looking towards what happened. That statue is the testimony that she did what she did. We don't know where are the remains of Lot, but we know that there is a statue of salt, and that statue of salt is witness of the destruction, a destruction that she was not willing to let happen without looking, without watching. And I think of one time, I grew up in the city of Mérida in the Yucatan, which is a very peaceful city. Is after, I think, Quebec in Canada, the safest city in the continent. Not a lot of crime. But one day, my family and I went to Mexico City. And we heard all of these stories about how dangerous was Mexico City. And I remember my father telling me, if we're walking, this didn't happen, but this was what my dad told me, and I was like 6 years old. If we are like in the subway and you see that someone is getting robbed or something worse, you just walk faster. Don't get involved. Pretend that it's not happening, because it can happen to you then, because you're messing with something that is not your business. That is more or less what it was asked from Lot, and he did it. She didn't do it. She knew that she didn't have the power to stop the destroying, the obliteration of the city. But at least she can be a witness. At least she can say, I testify for what happened. I testify, even if the only testimony that there is my own body now made out of salt. I'm going to look back. But of course, the Natalie Diaz is not talking only about the biblical story. There is one moment, there are two moments in the poem where she makes this contemporary. She wondered, has she unplugged the coffee pot, the iron? Was the oven off? That is non-biblical. That is completely contemporary. Because we are all Lot's wife. And we all have some destruction that we're running away from. And even worse, I would say that right now, we are not being asked to not look back. We're asked to not look ahead, because the destruction is happening right in front of us. And the only thing that we need to do is not to close our eyes, not to turn back, not to be Lot. She is the one that we remember, because she decided to not turn her back, literally, turn her back to history, turn her back to the present, turn her back to the destruction of those that were among her neighbors, children, everybody, the city itself. She had to leave, but not to deny that she was there, not to forget, not to just let it happen. And this is not as easy as it sounds in our everyday life. I think that the connection of this poem with life, especially in these moments, is very evident. But there is the birth of something, this beautiful, can we go a little down? The beautiful last stanza, this image, where she said, dark thighs of smoke opened into the sky. Like something is being birthed. Something is happening. Thighs of smoke. This, the choosing of these words is very wise, because the flames are going up, right? The city is in between the smoke. Something is happening there. And when we think about the times that in history someone has wanted to destroy entire cities, later we see that those cities flourish. That is impossible to obliterate completely a culture. It has been so far. I don't know what is impossible anymore, but it has been impossible so far. Cultures end for other reasons. But she meant at some point to look away. And we have the last three verses. But the sting in her eyes, but the taste devouring her tongue, and the neighbors begging her name. This is happening, and people are calling, literally calling her name. It has to be very hard to not turn when the people that you know are calling your name, and that is happening contemporarily. We have friends that are affected by things. They are not someone that we don't know. They are there. They are there, and we have shared a bread with them. We have shared a street with them. We have shared a hug with them. And now they are begging for us to at least be witness, at least to acknowledge that the destruction, that the injustice, that all of this is happening. The way that Natalie Diaz seems to be making a non-political poem when she is actually making a very political poem is masterful, I believe. I appreciate poems that say more than what they mean to say, or what they seem to say. And this is, I'm not afraid to say, this is a poem that talks about many different kinds of destruction. This is the physical destruction of something. This is the moral destruction of something. This is the obliteration of someone's rights. This is the obliteration of some type of people. And what I think that is important in this poem is to realize that a spiritual practice like contemplation can be also be linked to another spiritual practice like bearing witness. I believe that poetry is an act of bearing witness of transcendence influence in this world. The poets see transcendence happening in this world, and the poem itself is a testimony of that transcendence happening here. Love is, for me, the gaze of transcendence in another person. You see that person and you see transcendence in that person. Natalie Diaz sees Lot's wife and understand that Lot's wife is not only Lot's wife, but is everybody. This character has transcendence, its moment and place in that fiction to become us. Being Lot's wife, even if we have to turn into a status of salt, is the only dignified way to live history. Being Lot's wife, because she remains. She is the statue of salt. She didn't disappear. Her body is there, and her body is turning straight to the conflict. She did not look away. And not because she wasn't scared, but bravery only is possible when you are afraid. If you are not afraid, you cannot be brave. You're just reckless. She was afraid, and then she did it. That is being brave. We don't know her words. We know now, thanks to Natalie Diaz, what she saw, what she could have heard. But we do know that she dissented. She disagreed. And that is the reason she is important. This poem is indeed a spiritual poem. She talks, and I love how she talks about the crook-legged angel. I was about to forget this. The angels in this story, angels are very human. They're very corporal. Before this happened, two angels see Lot at the doors of the town. Lot takes them to his house. They have dinner. The angels eat food. And then the men of the town come and ask the angels to come out and it's a tricky story. And then because of this, the city is later obliterated because the men of the town want to hurt the angels. But when she talks about the angels, she makes them even more human. There is an angel with a crooked leg. Because everything that she saw, everything that Lot's wife saw, was completely real. The obliteration of the city does not seem to be the obliteration caused by a divine power. It was people claiming divine forces. The people were doing this. And if people are doing it, other people have to be a witness. So she was. I think that this is a very contemporary poem. I hope that one day is not. But right now, I think that it's a poem about holding your spiritual ground, holding your dignity, and holding up the dignity of others, at least by bearing witness to the intention that others have to destroy them. This poem is not for the faint of heart. And that is all I'm going to say about this poem. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Manuel. So we'll move into some writing time. Do you have a prompt?
Yes. I do have a prompt. Now, this poem is about that, bearing witness. And I want you guys to think about one time in your life, or 2 times, or 3 times, where you could have, out of fear, close your eyes or look away, but you knew that it was necessary for you to take that in. Think about that time, I don't know, you knew that you didn't want to go to the hospital and see that person that was hospitalized because you didn't want it to see it like that. But you knew that you have to go. You couldn't look away. You couldn't pretend that that wasn't happening. Or that one time where you said, well, I have to talk about this with my parents. I have to face this reality. I cannot look away. And in those cases, this is also important in the poem. I think I forgot to say it. We have to act alone. Her job was not to convince Lot. Let's look back. She just had to do it herself. So think about those moments and start. Your first verse should be, I didn't close my eyes when.
All right, we'll take 10 minutes and we'll come back at 3:43 and I'll kind of check in a minute or 2 before then to see how we're doing. So. So we have 2 minutes left, and I'll call us back when it's time to share. All right. So if you want to find a good stopping place, maybe finish your last sentence, we'll come back together, and Manuel will facilitate the sharing of poems. So if you would like to share what you've written, go ahead and put your name in the chat, and we will get to as many as we can in the next 12-ish minutes. All right. So I'll hand it over to you, Manuel.
So please put your name in the chat, and that will be the order that we will follow. This exercise, because of the nature, because of the confessional nature of the prompt, can be a little intense. So I am going to ask for everybody's sensibility here. People might share very personal things. I'm just saying this out loud so everybody feels comfortable with sharing, and for people to be considerate of those who are being vulnerable right now. Let's start with my friend, Dick. Please, you wanna open it?
Hey, Dick, your audio was, oh, that's still, yeah, there's a loud ringing sound happening.
Can you hear
There
me
we
now?
go. That's good.
You just fixed it, yes.
Okay. I didn't close my eyes when Bob pulled a gun from his drawer, waved it wildly like some desperate flag of surrender, eyes so wide, so wild, like pulsars they burned, afraid we'd stop him, terrified we wouldn't. He dodged around his desk, sobbing so hard, we feared he'd drown before he shot himself, or one of us, if he'd forget his mission, or if he became convinced we'd keep him from it. We breathed with the beat of his weeping, called love into the space between us, slowly closed the distance until we were stopped writing.
Thank you, Dick. Continue after today and close that poem. Now we're gonna hear from Desiree, the silent poet, Hosley.
Thank you. Um, Here we go. I didn't close my eyes when I heard him call out to his mother. I didn't close my eyes when I heard him say that he couldn't breathe. I didn't close my eyes from each gun casing that hit the ground. I didn't close my eyes when the baby was holding up the Black Lives Matter sign. I didn't close my eyes as tears shed from being tired. I didn't close my eyes because Black lives should not have to continue the fight of just being recognized instead of victimized. I didn't close my eyes because the work needs to get done.
Thank you. Thank you, Desiree. One important thing about the poem of Natalie Diaz is that it makes us realize that being, in some capacity, being an activist is a human need, you know. Geraldine, can you please share with us?
I didn't close my eyes when you cornered me in my building's entry. I opened them and my heart wider, praying all the while. I looked at you, I saw you, I listened to you, even though you in your desperation were willing to hurt me, even threatened to rape me. You didn't. I disarmed you with being seen. I diffused your anger with the balm of interest. You left me with $5.17 and a thank you. I didn't close my eyes for 3 days afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you. I love the way you closed that poem. It gave a different meaning to the prompt.
Mm-hmm.
Sandra.
I didn't close my eyes when he appeared as if out of nowhere on the Boston sidewalk beside us. An old, ailing man, disheveled and desperate to get to his church. His body was bent to one side, listing like a dark ship about to sink, puffs of his white breath forming in the air in front of him, signaling supreme effort. My teenage son and I were the two people closest to him, and so we, strangers to the man, half bent towards his mission, hell-bent towards his mission, each took an arm, hoisting him forward, his weight leaden as if he was not enlisting a single muscle. His eyes trained on the church, shrouded by March drizzle in the distance, and his last legs were going to cross that threshold. Silently and without hesitation, we gave our bodies to his cause, carrying him towards his holy rest.
Thank you, Sandra. I got a little lost right here. Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. They're so amazing today.
Hi, Sarah.
Mine is very incomplete. I didn't close my eyes when I heard people were peeing into bottles because walking to the bathroom took 5 minutes too long. When I heard doctors were instructed not to recommend treatment for humans injured, humans with strong, sinewy hands, humans with tight necks and stiff backs, humans who are grandmothers and sons and English speakers and Spanish speakers and descendants of people who survived enslavement and descendants of people who enslaved others, humans all needing care. I didn't close my eyes when I heard the carefully constructed statements to the press. Reported injuries have decreased over time. Prime Day is our safest day. And that's all I got so far.
Thank you. Ben, will you
Hey
please?
everybody. Thank you for sharing your exquisite writing. So mine, I used more the spirit of, I didn't close my mind when, and I took another biblical figure, another woman who the poem of Natalie's reminded me of, another woman we don't really get to hear much of. And I imagine this is a poem in the voice, I imagine this poem being in the voice of Jesus, sort of not closing his eyes to this woman, something he sees special about this woman. So this woman is the Canaanite woman. So she goes to Jesus, she has like severe disability, her child has severe disabilities, and Jesus is just meeting her for the first time. The story is that I, Jesus, healed her child, but I didn't. The Canaanite woman healed me. She showed me how far away from God I was. I thought I lived in God's palace, but I hadn't yet even reached his front door. I would only touch the afflicted, then leave. I wouldn't live with them. I didn't make them breakfast. I didn't place pencils back into their hands, teaching them to write after they stabbed me with them. I didn't clean up shattered glass of the framed painting I had devoted months to making, which only took 1 second for the afflicted to knock to the floor and slash with a knife. I didn't cook them dinner an hour later. I didn't take them to the doctor after they ripped up my 7 books. I never signed them up for swimming lessons. I asked the Canaanite woman to join my ministry and preach with me because she was an expert in the mystery, the cosmos beyond the brick limits of love. She said no. She had to raise her son, rewrite her books, and write new ones. Thank you.
That rewriting is important, I think. That rewriting that you talk about at the end, Ben, I believe is very important.
Thank you.
Susan.
First timer, so thank you.
Nice to see you, Susan.
I didn't close my eyes when his breathing became labored, his ravaged body shrunken beneath the sheets. I didn't leave the room when they said death was near, she with her inviting darkness and finitude. I remember taking my place at his feet, laying on hands in baptism or unction. His feet still warm for the moment, life still coursing reluctantly through his veins. I didn't close my eyes as I counted breaths, counted seconds between breaths, listening for the last breath. I didn't want to miss it, that moment when he stepped into heaven. I may have blinked. I may have closed my eyes in prayer, holding on to his feet, and in that moment, the silence. The rain sprinkled water on the window. The last rites complete. The silence gave way to my wail.
Thank you. What a brave poem to write, Susan. What a brave poem to write. Thank you. Emma, are you there, Emma?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. I don't think I can see you.
I'm here.
Oh, there we go.
My 5th grade students asked me to buy them dictionaries and books. I kept bringing stuff from my house into the classroom. They wanted to have their own, take them home, not on loan. There weren't any bookstores in the Bronx. Their parents wanted to have them. Aquí, Miss Baez, mi papá le manda dinero para que le compre el diccionario a la niña. we went to Barnes and Nobles because the principal for the day guy donated money, and I told him I didn't want to buy books for the students, but I wanted them to pick them up to experience shopping for books. He didn't close his blue eyes and white skin. He opened them wide. And 32 kids and I hopped on a subway and traveled 40 minutes to our closest bookstore.
What a beautiful story. I think we do have time for Julie.
Thank you for this prompt and for these beautiful poems that people have shared. Really appreciate them. I don't have a title yet. It's still rough. I didn't close my eyes while he was still at rest in the hospital bed, but I cannot tell you what I saw. And what I remember is nothing like seeing, only the shock of his too warm skin. I have no inkling how long I held his hand. My ears still thicken with his mother's cry. Somehow, I went away. That night, somehow, I lay in my bedroom next to the hospital. I closed my eyes and slept. The next morning, I came back again to imprint his memory, to witness the miracle of some small return of consciousness. But when I gave his name, when I asked for him, the concierge lowered her eyes, silent, and shook her head.
Thank you. Now I'm gonna ask Ro if we can read one more in this 1 minute.
Sure, why not?
In that case, Elena, you're gonna close us off.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. This is such a wonderful experience. I didn't close my eyes when you rejected me, when you declared in front of strangers that I was a non-person, not even worthy to be called by my name. I was a witness to your cruelty, to the mud transforming your feet to clay. The sister that I praised the most took what was left of my heart and left it there at the cemetery of forgotten souls, the ones whose names were erased by time and weather. You've asked me 1,000,000 times to forgive you, but there was no forgiveness reflected in your eyes, only the vacant look of a hollowed out tree. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, before I again give the word to Ro, I just want to say thank you for being vulnerable, and thank you for allowing others to be vulnerable with you. Often when we say a prayer here in the house and we do intentions, we say also for those intentions that are kept in our hearts. Some of you didn't get to read your poem. Some of you decided to not read it today, but all of you talked about something or thought about something that is deeply important to you. You all thought today about a moment where you had to confront your worst fears, where you had to get inside and outside yourself. This is what we will call the journey of the hero. This is an initiation process. This is what we witnessed today again. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. I appreciate a lot that you guys were willing to share that. Berdine, thank you for your silence too, for your emotion. Bro.
Yes, thank you. So it's just some housekeeping as we wrap up each session. We share the poems on thewell.world. And so you can, whether you shared them or didn't share them, you can email those to me and I will follow up with a more detailed email to all of you once I have that set up. Our next gathering will be December 2nd, which is unusual. It's not the last Wednesday, but kind of the in-between time because of the holidays. And before Manuel reads the poem one last time, I'm going to hand it over to Eddie to share a little bit about some poetry things happening with On Being.
Yeah, at the risk of being a broken record, thank you all for a beautiful day. And thank you, Manuel, for an incredible reading of the poem and a really generous invitation and prompt. This was, I'm so happy with the day. I want to share before we leave, On Being has just launched a new poetry page if you all are interested to visit, and I feel like you all might be the people that we've made this for. So I'm excited to share the link here, and I'll do just a really brief screen share so you can see what it looks like. But we've basically created a whole page where you can see all of the interviews that we've had with poets, a link to the Poetry Unbound podcast, which is in the middle of its second season, and those are the poems that we've been using for our gatherings. We also have a link to our full archive, a way to search through our poems, and this is an exciting piece too, a link to poems that we've started to create films of. So they're sort of animated versions of certain poems. So you can see here some that are created by Padre Gotuma, Wendell Berry, Naomi Shihabnai. Some of these I think we've used before too in our gathering, so it's exciting to share them here. But again, the link is in the chat, and I welcome you all to visit. I'm excited to share it with you all, and thank you again for being here today. This was great.
Thank you. Before we leave, Manuel, would you read the poem one more time? And I'll share it.
Of Course You Look Back by Natalie Diaz. Of course you look back. You would have to. From that silence, from that distance, the shivering city fit in the palm of her hand like she owned it. She could have blown the whole thing, markets, dance halls, hookah bars, send the city and its hundreds harems tumbling across the desert like a kiss. She had to look back. When she did, she saw pigeons glinting like debris above the ruined rooftops, towers swaying, women in broken skirts stew along the burnout streets like busted red bells. The noise was something else. Dogs wept, roosters howled, children and guitars popped like kennels of corn feeding the twizzling blaze. She wondered, had she unplugged the coffee pot? The iron? Was the oven off? Her husband ordered, keep going, whispered, stay the course, or baby, forget about it. She couldn't. Now, a bursting garden of fire, the city bloomed to flame after flame, like hot fruit in a persimmon orchard. Someone thirsty asked for water. Someone scared asked to pray. Her daughters, or the crook-legged angel, maybe. Dark thighs of smoke opened to the sky. She meant to look away, but the sting in her eyes, the taste devouring her tongue, and the neighbors begging her name.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. I'll follow up with another email and hope to see you December 2nd. All right.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
You all.